fades, when all is stripped away, and I simply come, longing just to...
Hello again. When I look at Salisbury Cathedral, its fine spire and magnificent nave, I wonder that a carpenter from Nazareth should have inspired such an architectural gem. And when the choir sings the Magnificat and the Nunc Dimittis, and the choir stalls are filled with voices that resonate in the rafters, I wonder and marvel that a man born in an obscure village in the Middle East 2,000 years ago should inspire such beauty. And it continues to amaze me that a wonderful high mass with all the associated ceremonial, and in fact a Eucharist anywhere, should have its roots in a man who worked in a carpenter's shed until he was 30. It's truly amazing that the man described as King of Kings and Lord of Lords should never have held high office or a post of authority, and no civic honour was ever conferred upon him. Had anyone decided to start a world movement with a 30-year-old carpenter from a little-known place in the Middle East, they would have been regarded as foolish. And yet, all the armies that ever marched, and all the navies that ever sailed, and all the parliaments that ever sat, and all the kings that ever reigned, have not affected the life of humankind on earth as much as that solitary life. This same man entered Jerusalem in triumph on a donkey. He was born in a stable, had no place to lay his head. He was nailed to a cross, buried in a borrowed tomb, and rose to new life. What should we make of this one solitary life? I find the words of St. Paul helpful here, when he writes, "The message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God." The stable in Bethlehem, the donkey on which he entered Jerusalem, and the cross on the green hillside, and the borrowed tomb in the garden, in these down-to-earth and everyday places, we find God powerfully at work. Take the baptism of Jesus by John. It took place not in a palace of kings and princes and princesses, but in the murky waters of the River Jordan. A backwater, it's true, but where, nevertheless, the voice of God was heard and a dove of peace was seen. This is the wisdom of God at work. Foolish to some, perhaps, but wisdom to those being saved. These lowly things enabled the power and presence of God to be made manifest to the many and not simply to the few. Had the Lord Jesus been confined to a royal house or hall, then many would have been excluded. Remember, both shepherds and kings honoured the Holy Child. God in a stable, at a manger, a man riding on a donkey and on a cross and in a garden. These might not seem very impressive or noteworthy, and yet for those being saved, they reveal or speak, if you will, of the things of God and of God's wisdom. You know, the human ego and a highly entrenched self-will can be a real obstacle to spiritual progress. And God shows us another way. And perhaps we're beginning to realize this in these testing and challenging times in which we live. The pandemic has made us feel in varying degrees vulnerable and insecure, dependent on one another, where our survival depends on people around us following the rules rather than their own self-will or ego. God speaks to us in our weakness, and God is speaking to us now and in this moment. In our weakness, God's wisdom and strength are made manifest in us. God's weakness is stronger than any human strength. But God chose what is commonplace and what is ordinary in the world to speak to the worldly strong. For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than any human strength. What is at the heart of this is the love of God. God became a human being, was born in humility, and died up on a cross because of God's love for us and for his creation. Thanks to God's humility, God's meekness and majesty, expressed for us in Jesus, who did not cling to equality with God but took the form of a servant, we are able to become wise in faith and avail ourselves of God's indwelling hope and strength. And so as we go out into our day, there is reason to take heart. God is an ever-present help in times of trouble. And I leave you with the words by Graham Kendrick from his wonderful song, Meekness and Majesty. Wisdom unsearchable, God the invisible, love indestructible, in frailty appears. Lord of infinity, stooping so tenderly, lifts our humanity to the heights of his throne.
In my wrestling and in my doubts, in my failures, you won't walk out. Your great love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Whoa, you are the peace in my troubled sea. In the silence, you won't let go. In the questions, your truth will hold. Your great love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Whoa, you are the peace in my troubled sea. My lighthouse, shining in the darkness, I will follow you. Oh, my lighthouse, I will trust the promise. You will carry me safe to shore. Safe to shore. Safe to shore. Safe to shore. I won't fear what tomorrow brings. With each morning I'll rise and sing. My God's love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Whoa, you are the peace